I think what will remain imperative is that in terms of the consumption, in terms of gathering the knowledge, it's largely driven online today. And we will continue to, in times to come, measure the impact that all of the initiatives that we do in this space have in terms of business, which is both online and offline.
Hello and welcome to Flipcast, the digital marketing podcast by Flipkart Ads. I'm your host Varun Duggirala. On this podcast, we speak to industry leaders in the fields of marketing and digital advertising. But what do we talk to them about? We talk to them about the latest trends in the fields of marketing and digital advertising. We also tap into how they're building their audiences and driving results in the digital marketing medium. Our guest today is Saloni Shah. She's the Chief Marketing and Digital Officer at Oreal India. She's been with L'Oreal for over a decade, and in her current capacity, she's leading the transformation roadmap for India, focusing on 4 key areas: media, consumer experience, commerce, and consumer insights and research. Welcome to the show, Saloni.
Thank you, Varun.
After my long extended introduction, I want to kind of get into the conversation and ask you, in your role as Chief Digital and Marketing Officer, how have you seen digital play a core part in the overall way in which you connect to consumers?
So, for us, the beauty consumer has evolved very, very rapidly. And luckily, digital and beauty are a perfect match. Beauty is a category which is very, very visual. And at the same time, it's very shareable on social media. And I think what digitization essentially has done it has created democratization in India and also for the brands in which we play. Today, when you look at e-commerce, it services close to 99.9% of the PIN codes in the country, makes more than 20,000 beauty brands available to the consumer. So really, I think digital and digitization has been the game changer for brands at L'Oreal. It has essentially created a level playing field for us.
When you look at your own journey as a marketer, as a professional, especially over the last, let's say, 7-8 years, how have you seen your role really change? Especially because the landscape has changed so much, right? Digital has become such a core part of things. How have you seen your role change, and also give an outlook of how the landscape has changed along with your role really evolving?
So I keep joking around, Varun, in office these days, that for me, life at L'Oreal and life in general pretty much has come a full circle. When I started off a decade ago, we were just 2 people doing everything linked to media, and at that point 1% or less than 1% of digital. It was barely there even in terms of thinking, and then as we went through the years, I think that started shifting. Instead of 2 people, then we had a separate media team and a separate digital team, and digital would look at everything that you are doing online, whereas media would continue to look at everything that you are doing offline. And I think the way that has changed is today the teams that we have are O+O. There is no media, there is no digital. Digital is a part of media, online and offline. Okay. So they look at everything from whether it's television planning to planning on digital to planning on e-commerce, because the consumer is one, and we cannot plan in isolation in order to reach out to the consumer, So I think that's really changed from looking at online separately, offline separately, e-com separately, to looking at a world where everything is one. When I started off, and I'm sure you've seen that in your journey as well, you had to make a use case for brands to be on digital. Yeah. You had to really sell it internally. And I think my journey was similar. I started off in media, and then 2 years into L'Oreal, I was working on Garnier. And it was really about how is it that you make a use case to sell a 40 rupee sachet of hair color online. Yeah. So from that to today, where I think it's fully evolved, we call it digital marketing, but I think it was more appropriate to call it digital marketing in the past, because today all the marketing that we largely do is digital in nature, and so when we call it digital marketing, I think we're still differentiating But in essence, I think it's come a full circle, because when I started off, it was marketing. It was one word. To a point that we had to call it different names, call it online, digital, etc. I think till today, where I think I see the move back on referring to it as marketing. So that's how my journey has been.
And if you kind of look into consumer behavior, looking at this way in which consumers are now tapping into e-commerce to buy products, how are you seeing consumer behavior really change?
So I think I'll start with the consumer first.
Yeah.
For us, I think we see two broad spectrums of consumers which are very, very polarizing. There are few who are looking for high value, high end, highly differentiated products, and then there are many who are looking for value or sometimes extreme value in the products that they purchase. And I think that has given us a good standing, because as L'Oreal, we operate in 4 divisions. So on one side, we have the consumer mass beauty, and the other side of the spectrum, of course, is luxury. So it gives us a good spectrum to play in. So I think that's one shift that we see in terms of consumers. And I think the second largest shift is the fact that there are close to 659 million smartphones in India today. And everything that the consumer is doing is pretty much on that phone, from the content that she's consuming to the way that she is shopping to how she discovers her products today. And even now, where payment is concerned, you could pretty much spend an entire week or a month in the country today with just your phone. And with all of this, it has given us a chance to relook at the way we reach out to our consumers. And yes, we have a digital first mindset in everything we do in order to beat these shifts.
Yeah. And how does this connect to the fact that obviously there are single brand stores, you're in multi-brand retail, there's also e-commerce, and they're all kind of like, it's this mixture of all these things. How do you keep the conversation consistent across all of these?
So I think it's not perfect today, right? I think times are evolving, and there was a time when we used to only think offline, and there is a time when the shift happened that we largely think online. But to think omni-channel, to think of delivering the same consumer experience wherever the consumer goes, I think that is something that we are bringing in more and more with the help of data. We're starting with identifying who a consumer is, getting his or her details, and then understanding the way she shops. To bring in seamlessness regardless of the touch point at which she is present.
L'Oreal is an established brand, right? And one of the things, when you look at this segment specifically, it's always been a try and buy kind of a market. And people always want to try before they end up buying. And obviously went through a period in time during COVID where the trying couldn't happen, and that would have led to some shifts. But how do you see consumers today? Are they still looking for the try part? Are they comfortable in some areas? How do you see that shift happen?
So I think basic consumer behavior does not change, right? When they are consuming a category. It's not that the consumer is thinking, acha, because we're interacting online, I'll behave differently versus offline. So I think what she seeks in the category pretty much remains the same. And I think COVID has accelerated a lot that we do, but in 2018, L'Oreal acquired a company called Modiface. With their AI-driven modeling, what they do deliver is a AR-driven experience of how you could try the different shades of lipstick or liner or hair color for that matter. And I think we've implemented our virtual try-ons today on Flipkart in order to exactly bridge this gap, right? Because that one, beauty is very, very nascent in the market. Two, you want to try different shades because ultimately it's not about what a brand endorser says looks good, but it's about what you believe looks good, and you want to try and play around to see what suits your skin. And so we launched our virtual try-ons on Flipkart. And it's not that it's there only for the L'Oreal bouquet of brands. It's there across the category. So today as a consumer, you want to go and try on different shades and see which brands you prefer or which you don't. You can pretty much do that seamlessly on e-commerce, just the way you do it offline. So we are trying more and more, Varun, to simulate offline experiences online, and in some cases online experiences offline, as we continue to live in this digital world.
I feel another way the whole offline to online pieces happen is through influencers, right? Because influencers are almost, they're playing the consumer in the way they're creating content around products. I know that you invest in influencer marketing a fair bit. How have you seen that change how, let's say, the brand narrative gets built, but also on the other end, how do you see that really affecting how you connect to the consumer, how kind of build that drive towards results?
So I think the consumer today is looking for authentic connections, and the consumer wants to build trust with the brands that they want to buy. They want to understand what is it that these brands really stand for. Is it just the 20-second spot that they see on television or another screen, which is enough to convince them to purchase, or does it take a lot more? And I think at least in the case of beauty, it takes a lot more, like we were discussing earlier. For the consumer, it's all about how does this look on me, and it's not really so much about how does it look on Aishwarya Rai Bachchan or Aditi Rao Hydari, who are some of our endorsers. And so we do work with a fairly large influencer army, and the thought really is that you do the litmus test of your brands and your products through these people who are the real voice, for the consumer. That's number one. Number two, advocacy also really works for us, because with the big endorsers, you talk about your product or brand maybe once or twice, that's what you shoot, right? But with influencers, you could continue to activate differently. It's not just about one message that you'll share about the brand, which is the USP or the reason to believe in it, but you could share a lot more in terms of how to, in terms of regime, and given again the nascency that beauty has in India today, given that we do want to build this category by establishing a lot of new gestures, education becomes core. And I think advocacy also allows us to educate the market at large. So our dream really, Varun, is to be the beauty advisor to India, and which is why we look at our content creators as our army of beauty and beauty advisors online. But that's really the way we look at it. And to your question on ROI, I think everything that we do at L'Oreal is backed by data. So we have our triple M's in place, which help us see the ROI in the midterm to long term. And then of course there is a lot of affiliate marketing that we do via the influencers. In many cases we use advocacy and the content that's created there to divert traffic online, say on the product detail pages of Flipkart, and then there is an agreement of data pass back where you understand how that campaign is doing, what is really converting, what isn't. So that's, yes, some of the ways in which we measure the work that we do on advocacy.
But explain triple M for people who might not know what that means.
So it's a market mix modeling, which basically gives you a read of all of the different initiatives that you take through the year. How does it perform in terms of your return on investment? So it helps you read directionally where it is that you should be putting your marketing dollar. You
also a little earlier mentioned the AI tool you kind of brought in to really bring in trying on digital platforms. Especially when playing in the digital space, bringing new technologies, bringing innovations, really kind of change the way, you're almost shifting a consumer to experiencing something in a way which feels so natural, but they didn't think of. Can you dig into any other cases in this space that you actually use technology to really enhance the consumer experience, but also even look at how you function internally in a way that makes it far more interesting?
I think in terms of technology per se, I think Modiface is one of the biggest interventions that we've made. And it goes far beyond, right? Because it's not about a one-time thing, but it's about ensuring that the machine has enough weight of data in order to learn and in order to give the right experiences. Today, can we say that it's 100% there in terms of what you would actually try the product offline? Do you get the same sense online? No, it's not fully there. But it's evolutionary. So I think in terms of effort, we put a lot of effort out there. And I think then in terms of technology, it's more about managing the back end, because what has also happened with so much of digitization and so many different touch points, that have been fragmented, and then so many different e-commerce players with whom we work, is the entire piece on content. You need to be making content on the fly for different platforms, for different needs, basis the funnel across brands. And I think what we have also done internally to manage this is that we have a PIM and DAM in place to ensure that all of the content is lying in one place, so that we could repurpose a lot of what we make, and that there is a single repository for any starting point. You're not storing it in simple ways. So I think that also, in terms of simplifying the complexities that exist in today's fragmented world, helps us from an operational lens. But yeah, those are some of the two things that we are doing.
I think it'll also be interesting to dig into what you mean by DAM.
So PIM and DAM, basically the two systems that we use. PIM stands for Product Information Master, and DAM is basically a data asset manager. What they essentially do is, PIM is a repository of all of your product information. So the codes, the ingredients that go into it. A lot of times when you're optimizing for search and the different copies that you write, all of that is stored within the PIM. And within the DAM, all of the creatives that you use, whether they're video, whether they're static, all of that is stored in one place. And then it also manages your IP rights, etc., because you know what content is expiring when, which also becomes important, so that you're not sued later on by one of your endorsers or advocates. But that's essentially what PIM.
It's almost like managing all the assets in one digital repository.
Yes.
You mentioned two-way communication with consumers, right? That's one of the game changers, just to really understand the consumer. Had there been certain aspects of just understanding the consumer, almost elements that came up about a consumer because of the two-way conversation, that kind of changed how you looked at who maybe the actual consumer was? Has there been, we never realized these would also be consumers, or like this is how the consumer thinks? Would there be?
Yeah, absolutely right. So at L'Oreal, we very also actively do a lot of social listening, which feeds back into our marketing communications, brand, product, etc. And earlier, the age-old way of doing marketing is you look at demo and geo in terms of audiences. It's a male or a female, X age to Y age. You look at affluence, and you look at some of the markets in which he or she is present. But I think that's totally changed, right? Because there is so much that the consumers also giving in via digital. So much that you try and understand via the reviews and ratings that are there, for example, on e-commerce. And so much of a behavior. We've really changed the way we look at the audiences today. You're not looking for a certain cohort specified by demographics and geographics alone, but you're actually looking at it more basis behavior. And when you're trying to reach out to the consumers basis behavior, then you are ensuring that you're not putting them in a very tight box, but you're creating different cohorts and different personas, ensuring that you target different products based on what the consumer is really looking for, ensuring that your communication is then personalized in order to reach out to the cohort. So I think, I think that's the journey between what we used to do in a one-way world versus what we do today in a two-way world.
It's going to continue to be a seesaw till we figure this one out. We've also been through almost, I call it 3 phases, right? We had a phase pre-COVID, which was still predominantly offline based. Digital was, kind of scaling up in terms of connecting with consumers and moving for purchase. And a period during COVID where everything was digital. And now we're back in a scenario where, it's almost like offline is making this comeback. How has the mix and how you look at, really connecting with consumers changed in the newest phase, which we're in right now?
I think we always adapt, right, to the way the consumer behavior is changing. When it was offline, the modes of communication, etc., was also offline. It's about then ensuring you have the right POS in store, the right branding, the products are placed within the right category adjacency, etc. To a world that became completely online during COVID. But I think that for us in India was short-lived. However, there is a lot of acceleration that happened in terms of understanding the consumer behavior on digital. To the world today, which is omni, consumers are researching online, comparing prices online, but going and buying offline. I think what remains important is what we partly discussed before, to ensure that brands are providing seamless information across online and both offline. It's not that there is a difference that the consumer feels in the way she experiences the brand. And I think that for us is what is going to change in times to come, because you for example look at pricing. It's completely different on e-commerce today versus how it is managed in offline. The level of product information that is available offline is just what you see on the back of a pack, versus on online. Today on e-commerce, you have so much of in-depth A+ content, on the pages for consumers to know and research about your brand. There are ratings and reviews that help guide the consumer in terms of what may work or what may not work. So I think it's a combination that we're also grappling with in terms of understanding. But I think what will remain imperative is that in terms of the consumption, in terms of gathering the knowledge, it's largely driven online today. And we will continue to, in times to come, measure the impact that all of the initiatives that we do in this space have in terms of business, which is both online and offline.
It's interesting you mentioned behavior as a way to look at a consumer, right? When you look at behavior, especially in today's world, which is so performance driven when it comes to really, selling to consumers, it's also the whole element of brand building. How do you look at balancing brand building and performance, especially now that you look at behavior and also the dynamic way in which you're connecting with the consumer?
So I think the perfect balance we're still to arrive at, right? Because I think both have their pros and cons that you can measure in the immediate short-term effect, so to say. I think when it comes to performance, really today, the entire data and the intel that the e-commerce platforms have to offer, where you can so minutely and clearly know and differentiate a consumer who is purchasing the category but not purchasing your brand, know of consumers who are not purchasing the category at all, or for example, consumers who have purchased some of your categories within brand A but not the others, and you can clearly understand these signals on e-com. And I think on performance, you're largely then planning basis sufficiency, so you understand how big each of these cohorts are, and then depending on the objective, because if you're a challenger brand, then you're not looking so much to grow the category, but maybe to win from immediate competition. So basis sufficiency, we arrive at how much is needed to spend. Also on e-commerce or D2C, because it's the last mile of conversion, a lot of budgeting is then decided basis how much really is needed in order to build that channel profitably. So I think for performance, it's more sufficiency based. And I think then when it comes to branding, it's really about the entire game is largely about reach and frequency in a way, because you try and identify the cohort size that you need to reach in order to make your eventual conversions happen through the entire brand health funnel, and then ensuring that you're speaking to the consumer enough times and not overdoing it and creating sort of avoidance, but doing it enough number of times in order for some recall and some residue to be left. So there are a lot of modeling exercises that we do internally in order to arrive at the perfect combination. And then of course, we are subscribed to all of the brand health trackers that are there, where you can on a month-on-month basis measure input versus output and also see that impact in the mid to long term. So I think based on some of these methods, we try and understand how much we should be spending on performance versus branding. But what we clearly know, Varun, is that it's not either or, it is always a combination. And we will, with all of the data and the AI and the ML that exists today, at some point arrive at that sweet spot.
Yeah. I also know that L'Oreal has a strong focus on sustainability, right? Especially with the amount of consumption happening, there is a clear focus on saying that how do you make this responsible in that sense. So love for you to kind of tap into that part and say what all are you doing to kind of build that into how you function.
So I think at L'Oreal we really respect the Earth's planetary boundaries, that exist, and we have a dedicated program which is called L'Oreal for the Future, and under which we are taking up several different sustainability initiatives. Some that are in India and some that are global in nature, from saving the oceans to ensuring plastic waste management, which is an initiative that Garnier has picked up, and it's created a recycling facility in Chennai where we're recycling close to 2,000 ton of plastic. So I think on one end, yes, we're trying to drive more and more sustainability in the work we do, but on the other side we're also trying to ensure that our products are more sustainable in terms of packaging. We're also trying to innovate in terms of ensuring that when you're using a shampoo, can you really create something that uses less water. So I think we're trying to approach it from a 2 or 3 pronged strategy in terms of product, packaging, and then trying to recycle everything that we put out there on the planet. So so that's some of the work that we do around sustainability.
Considering everything that is happening in this space, how do you keep yourself updated about, not just about trends and everything else that's going on, but to really getting a broader perspective on the entire space as well?
I think the best way to really stay updated is via interactions. We are also a very, very people-driven organization, so we believe in networking, and networking for the right reasons, not in order to get something done, but networking more to know what's happening and the changes that are happening around. So I think the best way where I ensure I keep myself updated, one is building those connections outside the organization with partners, with people in the industry, to really understand what's coming, what's new. I think that's one way. And I think the other one is getting the right people on your team, because it's not possible to know everything at every given point in time. But if you get people who are truly good at what they do, I think they will help upskill the teams, they will help upskill organizations, and ensure that, organizations stay ahead of the curve and not just some people within a specific team. So I think hire the right folks. I think that's what has worked for me so far.
And looking at how dynamic this entire space has gotten, almost the skill sets required, the upskilling required to function as a marketer has just kind of changed, right? I mean, there was a point of time when the skill sets were, I wouldn't say finite, but they felt finite compared to what it is like right now. If I'm a young marketer, young brand today, looking at navigating everything across brand building, e-commerce, across the board, what are the skill sets that really someone needs to kind of really work on building, and what should you upskill themselves towards?
So I think there are two mantras that I think that work. I think the first one, which is again a very L'Oreal mindset, is that we believe to seize what is just starting. I think experimentation becomes very, very key, instead of looking at newness from a distance, because I think a lot of times in bigger organizations you resist change. Which is why indie brands do so well, because they don't have the baggage of that legacy. There is no resistance because you're discovering as you go along. So I think it's important to seize what is starting, whether it was just offline or only online, or now the combination world that we talk of, which is online or offline, to continue to keep reinventing, to continue to test and learn and scale what's working, I think becomes very, very crucial. And I think the second mantra, and I think it's a very, very important one, there is a book called Think Again by Adam Grant, and he talks about unlearning and relearning. And I think in today's dynamic day and age, it's the key to anything that you do. When COVID hit all of us, it was about unlearning what we knew back then and relearning how the consumer behavior, everything is shaping up and changing so rapidly. And today again, the behavior post-COVID seems to have changed, right? Because while consumers are still digitally more savvy, while payments have completely to a large degree in the big cities changed to digital, offline still very much exists, And so to unlearn what we then knew during COVID about the consumer, to relearn and relook at the same principles that maybe didn't work then but may work today, becomes very, very important. So I think it's more about having that mindset and being very, very driven to learn. To learn all the things that are new, we don't have to become hardcore experts in everything. But today the buzzword of Gen AI, it's not that everybody needs to be a coder and understand how it's done. But I think what will be important is understanding the application of what Gen AI could do for your businesses, So it's not really about becoming the expert itself, but drawing basis the experience, the application of that expertise, which I think is something that we in today's day and age need to keep in mind as marketers.
Apart from these attributes, are there specific things you look at when you're hiring people in your team? I know that people are always looking out saying, okay, what do I need to, what are the elements you look at? What are the elements you look at when you're hiring someone for a team like yours?
So I think one of the key things that I'd love to look for is the inclination the person has towards beauty, because today if you yourself aren't consuming so much of the category, or you're not affine to it, or you're not really passionate about it, then building it, then selling it, then creating stuff around it is lip service, So I think the first thing we look for is the fit to beauty, the fit to the culture of the organization, and really if you're going to thrive in that environment or not, I think that's one element. And I think the second one, and I say this more because within the entire marketing, digital, e-commerce arena of things, specialization is key. I think I'm a believer of will over skill. So I think if somebody has the willingness to learn, they can learn any skill set, they can acquire any skill set. At one point of time, digital barely existed. When I told you when I started off in L'Oreal, it was the age-old offline media. I learned along the way, to a point where it's now largely an e-commerce driven world. It didn't exist in the days that I came from, but then you continue to learn. So I think it's about the will to learn, because if you really have that, and if you're passionate about what you're building and the brands that you stand for, you'll eventually pick up the skill sets that you need in order to win. So I think these are some of the things that I look for when we're looking at the right people to join us at L'Oreal.
What's also really happened is the landscape has really shifted. I think, obviously like fueled by platforms like Flipkart, where the e-coms really kind of came in, allowed, brands to really sell online and directly connect with consumers. You had legacy brands coming in and selling on the platform. You also had independent indie brands coming in, people, which came about. So look at the entire mix of independent and legacy. How do you see the landscape really shaping up?
One, like we were discussing, digital e-commerce has created a level playing field. Access for brands to consumers has become fairly easier. You don't need the full-blown shoots that you needed at one point with massive money in order to be on television, where you end up reaching out to everybody, whether or not they were your consumers. I think digital has really changed that, because in far lesser scale, you could actually get significant scale. You could have precision and speak to just the consumers that you need. So, will indie brands continue to exist? 100%. I think they challenge the legacy brands more and more on the new age, on the digital first thinking. They've really ensured that they speak to the consumer in a way that's more relevant, With so much of digitization, it's a two-way street, right? Because on social and on digital, even the consumers can speak with you. And for years, we've done marketing and advertising in a way where it's just one-way speak, where the brand is the only one speaking to the consumer. So I think a lot of that has changed. But, honestly, regardless of whether you're a legacy brand or you're an indie brand, what will remain very, very important in times to come is winning the share of the consumer's heart and mind. Because with a million products available on e-commerce today, with digital making so many brands more known to the consumer, there is only as much that the consumer is going to remember. And so I think the focus on brand building, regardless of the life stage of the brand, or regardless of whether you speak to the consumer online or offline, or whether he or she is buying on e-commerce or otherwise, brand building, brand awareness, to ensure that in today's performance driven world, you continue to build your love for your brand, I think will remain important and will remain key. And it is brands that manage to do this that will finally take the cake.
I'm pulling this one off as a question that's been on my mind, is saying this podcast is called Flipcast. If you had to forecast for the future, what would you look at as trends for the future?
I think one trend that I see coming for sure is that the world is going to be omni-channel. Consumer interactions, consumer journeys are not going to remain linear. The funnel that we've spoken about over all of these years and put some science basis and some structure basis is going to collapse. It's not any longer going to be a world where the first time the consumer experiences your brand is going to be via a 20-second ad. It's possible that the consumer experiences it when she's browsing on an e-commerce site, trying to find something else but stumbling upon something else, and that's how she gets aware about the brand. So I think the first trend that is surely coming in India is going to be that the world is going to be omni-channel, which makes it very, very complex. And so we will have to simplify the things that we do and the way in which we do things in order to win this. I think the second trend, and yes, of course, at one point there was the entire metaverse, Web 3.0, etc., but I think Gen AI and AI, ML, etc. is going to be here to stay. Simplifying sometimes a lot of the work that we do, ensuring it helps us bring in a lot of productivity, whether it's internal, whether it's consumer facing. So I think how AI impacts businesses in times to come is something that we will watch out for. But I think these are some of the two big trends that I think are going to be coming our way soon.
Thank you so much for coming on Flipcast, Saloni. You've shared a lot of stuff for all of us to kind of like learn from and distill and use in our own careers and our own companies, etc. So thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this. And thank you to all of you for tuning into Flipcast today.
Thank you, Varun. This was great.
For more episodes filled with insights like these, make sure you hit subscribe and ring that bell icon on YouTube. But you can also catch this podcast on your favorite audio platform, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, BingePods, or wherever you get your podcasts from. So till next time, keep flipcasting.
Yeah.